Okay, so this video is going to look through the sources about Athenian religion. So it's going to be a small section of the Old Oligarch, then Isocrates, Pausanias, who's not the king from the first Peloponnesian War, by the way, different one, and Xenophon. Okay, so this video is going to be particularly short, as these particular sections in the source book are nice and small, you'll be pleased to know. So we have this really small extract from the Old Oligarch, and there's literally a couple of lines in here that are quite useful. So it starts with, then there is the question of sacrifices, offerings, festivals and sanctuaries. So that shows the nature of Athenian religion. The common people are aware that individually the poor are quite unable to sacrifice and feast, to erect temples or to build a great and beautiful city, but they have found a means of achieving this end. Publicly, as a city, they frequently make sacrifices, so again showing the importance of religion to the Athenians. But it is the common people as individuals who enjoy the feasts who are allotted a share in the offerings. Some of the rich possess gymnasia, baths and dressing rooms for their private use, I should say, for their private use. But the common people build themselves many palaestrias, dressing rooms and public baths for their own use, and the rabble get more benefit from this than the wealthy minority. So you could pick up some of this about participation, showing that the poor, ordinary citizens sort of benefit the most from the democracy because the rich are paying for everything, but it needs a bit of explanation to go with it. Essentially, this little bit of the Old Oligarch is quite useful for showing us the nature of Athenian religion, which is they have sacrifices and offers and festivals, they build lots of temples, and it's all part of the calendar. So then we move on to a short section from Isocrates. So in the case of the gods too, those who bring us good are called Olympians, so they're the famous gods of the Greek religion, whereas those who control disasters and punishments have less pleasant names. There is a name for them, we'll go through it in class, but essentially there are two sets of gods. There's the ones they worship openly, and there's ones they're slightly afraid of. So the former, as in the Olympians, have altars and temples dedicated to them, hence why they're both in yellow, and then the latter are not honoured by prayer or sacrifice, we simply take steps to avert them. So, we'll go through this in lesson properly, but essentially we have this idea that there's two sets of gods that the Greeks, also the Athenians, are worshipping. You've got the Olympians at the top of Olympus, so Zeus, Athena, etc. And then you've got those who live underground, essentially, who the Athenians were slightly more fearful of. Then we have a few sections of Pausanias. So like I bumbled through in the introduction, it's not the same Pausanias who was a king of Sparta at the end of the second Peloponnesian War. It is a different guy. This guy is a geographer. You will notice for this section here that bit is deleted. So in your source book, if you're looking at it, you'll probably notice that these three lines are the same as these up here. That's just an error on my part from editing, so my apologies. Anyway, going for Pausanias then. The Athenians have two dedications from the tithe of war spoil, so that's the tribute. One is a bronze statue of Athena Promachos, derived from the Persian landing at Marathon. So a lot of Athenian buildings and temples are built on the basis of sort of Athenian propaganda, we're the best, we beat the Persians, we're incredible. And they used a lot of the spoils they got after the Persian War to do a lot of their building work. So this statue of Athena Promachos is one of these examples. They say that the engraving of the Battle of Lapis and Centaurs was on the shield. So this is all, again, symbolic of the Persian War. And the rest of the relief work was done by, I think it's Maius, I don't know how to pronounce that name, to the designs of Parrhasius, son of Evenor. Yeah, I'm sure you're fascinated to learn that. The spear point and helmet crest of this Athena can actually be seen by people sailing from Sunium. So what we have here is the fact that this statue is humongous and it's quite intimidating, and also shows that Athena is sort of controlling maybe some allies that will be coming into the city, because the moment you turn up in Athens you can see them. And it talks about how it's being Phidias' main work. Okay. So he carries on describing the Acropolis. So one enters a temple called the Parthenon. Everything on the pediment bears upon the birth of Athena. So the pediments are the sort of triangular square bits near the triangles. You see my mouse drawing it for you. The other end is the quarrel of Poseidon with Athens. Dear me, sorry. I just spotted that should say Athena over the country. So again, the Parthenon is a symbol of the importance of Athena and Poseidon. Obviously, Athena is one of the goddesses of war, and wisdom, and she also protects Athens. Poseidon is the god of the sea, and obviously Athens has got a naval empire, so it's not surprising that these two particular gods were really important to the Athenians. The statue itself is made of ivory and gold, so clearly very important, otherwise they would not have spent quite so much money on it and wealth on it. And then it says on the helmet there's a sphinx and some griffins on either side of it. And then the source continues, the statue of Athena is upright with a tunic reaching to the feet. On her breast the head of Medusa is worked in ivory. If you know the story of Medusa, Athena is linked to it and had cursed Medusa, I believe for being raped, off the top of my head. I'd have to double check that story. What we do have, though, is this particular statue of Athena sadly no longer exists, and it stood in the middle of the Parthenon, and it was humongous. And it was quite literally covered in jewels. So it says ivory and gold here. There was supposedly almost like rubies on it as well. It was highly, highly decorated. And remember, the Parthenon is also where they put the tribute from the allies into as well for safekeeping. So it kind of shows this kind of religious and political importance of Athena. The fact that she's honoured so strongly, and the fact that it's tied in with the tribute and then the empire shows kind of her role within Athens as well as one as protector. So and to emphasise this point, she holds a statue of victory. So again, Athens also very victorious, very powerful as a result of it, about 4 cubits high. On the other hand, a spear. At her feet lies a shield, and near the spear is a serpent. The serpent would be Acrothonius. On the pedestal is the birth of Pandora in relief. Hesiod and others have sung how this Pandora was the first woman. Before Pandora was born, as it known about womankind. The only portrait statue I remember seeing here was one of the Emperor Hadrian. So this tells you when this guy's writing, like significantly after the time of the Athenians. Because if you're talking about the Emperor Hadrian, I mean, he's not until sort of a couple of centuries AD. So we're talking, a while after. And anyway, he's still describing what it looks like, because it's no interest to us. Our last little source, I told you this video is going to be short, is just a short section from Xenophon. So Socrates was accused in a trial of basically blasphemy and sort of forcing the youth to abandon the gods, etc. So Xenophon was one of his pupils, and he's basically defending Socrates in this particular section of the book. So he says that in fact he introduced nothing new. So Socrates wasn't challenging religion any more than people who believe in divination make use of omens and sacrifices. They do not suppose that the birds or the people they chance to meet know what is good for the oracle seekers, rather that the gods use such things to indicate their intentions. This is what Socrates thought too. So he's not challenging religion, he's just as religious as any other Athenian, and the idea that he's going to be challenging it is absolutely ridiculous. The fact that Socrates was put on trial for sort of criticising, not criticising religion, but for blasphemy, shows that religion was really important to the Athenians, and that will become useful to you later when we talk about Socrates and his trial. And that is it for the sources on religion. The first set of sources is talking about the Eleusinian Mysteries, which was a religious festival / religious cult. That was a mystery, hence why they're called the Mysteries. They were women only. It was highly secretive. Most of, if not the vast majority of the festivals held in secret. The only bit that was seen was people sort of going off to be initiated into this particular religious festival, religious cult. So the source material that we're going to look at is not going to necessarily say very much, to be honest, but it gives us some really good evidence about the role of women in the Athenian democracy, as this was a women-only festival. Change my pen to a pointer. There we go. So we have Isocrates, who is one of the sources that we have for religion in general terms. So he talks about what the festival's based around, which is about Demeter and Persephone. So if you don't know much about the Greek mythology, this particular story is around the kidnap of Persephone by Hades. So Hades basically fell in love with Persephone and stole her. There's no other way of phrasing it. Her mother was very upset, and Demeter was one of the goddesses of the harvest and food and things like that. So when Persephone was missing, Demeter became very depressed, and she basically stopped caring for the world, and she was kind of just wandering around trying to find her. And all the crops started dying, everything kind of went horribly wrong, and there was no food. In order, this is like a really short version of the myth, in order to stop that from happening in the future, a deal was struck with Hades. So Persephone was allowed out of the underworld for around about 6 months of the year, and while Persephone is out in the sort of the upper world, as it were, her mother is happy, and you have warm weather and lots of bountiful fruits and crops, etc. And when Persephone then has to go back into the underworld, you then have the deaths of crops, etc. So that is where the belief comes from: spring and summer, when Persephone is with her mother, Demeter, and then you have winter and autumn, when obviously Persephone is back in the underworld. So the Eleusinian mysteries are around this particular story. So this particular source points out that only initiates, may hear what basically happens in these Eleusinian cults, Eleusinian mysteries. So that's kind of why we don't know very much. And it tells us that we know it's around to do with crops and the holy rite that brings us the crops. So that's the only thing that Isocrates is aware of, because, like I said, the whole thing's in secret. We then have a little section from Aristophanes' Frogs. I can't remember what Frogs is about. It doesn't really matter. But again, we have a chorus of initiates. So these are people who've joined the Eleusinian cult. So go around the sacred precinct of the goddess in a flower-laden grove. I will go, girls and women, to bear the holy torch where they celebrate the goddess's rites all night through. So we know it appears to be at night. We know that there's a torch, so like a procession, and we know that there are women and girls. So this is a really good source to show how little we know about it, but also importantly that it's participation of women in the Athenian democracy, which is quite nice. We then have Sophocles, who was a playwright. He wrote tragedies. And he talks about how thrice blessed are those mortals who pass to Hades after seeing these mysteries. So there was obviously, although a lot of misunderstanding and sort of secrecy, that's not even a word, secrecy around the cult, it was obviously held in some high regard, because those who would join the mystery would then be looked on favourably when you went to the underworld. So there you go. We then have another section about Aristophanes. There's quite a nice bit about the beliefs around Zeus, which I haven't highlighted. Zeus is ordained the death and founding of this piece. This particular play is based around trying to sign a peace treaty in the Peloponnesian War, sort of around the time of the Peace of Nikias. And essentially, two people go off and do it on their own, and they make peace and they bury the peace treaty. This is why I started digging up this piece, trying to prevent peace being broken. The more important thing is that we have this particular character who wants to become an initiate when they die, before they die, So again, shows the importance of this particular mystery. So I'm having a fight with my computer. Come on. So the next sort of sources is talking about the rise of rationalism and skepticism. So it's quite easy to think of the Athenians as being highly religious. Everybody had blind faith in the gods, etc., etc. And actually, there's quite a lot of source material that suggests that while, yes, there was very strong religious belief in Athens, not everybody was blindly following the gods or blindly sort of going through omens, etc. So that's what these sets of sources are talking about. So we have 4 sections from different plays by Euripides, and Euripides, as we would have seen in lesson if you've done this video last, is a tragic playwright. So I don't know the plots of all of these, but essentially Helen is about the Helen of Troy, being kind of kidnapped by Paris, etc. And Trojan Women is about the aftermath of the Trojan Wars and the women who were kidnapped and sold into slavery, etc. So not that particularly matters, just so you know what's going on. So we have what is God or not God or in between, seeing the divine leaping this way and that and back again by chance, inexplicable, unhoped for. So again, it's just the idea of this questioning of religion, like what is a god, how do gods work, this understanding, that the gods seem to be moving in kind of really mysterious ways and really erratically. So again, is it real? We're not sure. They're not saying there is no God. They're just sort of going, things don't quite make sense. On the other hand, we then have this particular character who's giving a prayer to Zeus, partly because of her situation. So uphold of the earth and throned over the earth. So talking about Zeus, compelling law of nature or the mind of man. But it does say whoever you are. So either you are a god, a compelling law of nature, or you're just kind of made up. So again, this kind of questioning about religion. Same in the Heracles section. For God, if he is truly God, needs nothing. So again, do you really need to worship the gods, because the gods don't seem to do very much. And this is kind of picked up on Euripides, this last section. Of the diseases of mankind, some are self-inflicted, others come from the gods. So there is this awareness that not everything that goes wrong in people's lives is because of the gods. It's also because men are just, well, not men, sorry, humans are just, well, human, and we do bad things to each other. And it also suggests that if the gods do anything reprehensible, so if they do anything truly awful, then they're not really gods, are they? If they're being really horrible to people and causing suffering. This carries on in quite a variety of different authors. You can tell I was reading a particular book had lots of different things. I do apologise for the size of the text as well. I'm doing this on a PowerPoint differently from how I used to do them. So then we have a section that's really focusing on particular sophists, so these wise teachers that went around Athens. And some of them were teaching, remember, things like maths, geometry, music, rhetoric is the big topic, and a lot of them were teaching science. There was lots of big scientific discoveries during this period that we still use today. So these particular sophists that are mentioned here are kind of, again, questioning the extent of which the gods existed, if at all. And one of them is actually called an atheist in here. So we have Protagoras, not my Greek pronunciations. So he is sort of, again, questioning what the gods are. So the first bit is more an introduction to what he's talking about. I won't read all the way through that. But he says in a book about the gods, I am unable to know whether they exist or that they do not. So again, he's not saying there are no gods. He's just also saying, I don't know if there are gods, and I don't know how to prove that there are gods. So that is, again, questioning of religion. And according to Diogenes, I think that's how you pronounce his name, it was because of the start to his book that he was expelled by the Athenians who burned his books in the marketplace. So there's obviously a lot of, as well, really strong religious belief in Athens, because otherwise why would they exile Protagoras unless what he was saying was challenging religious belief? So you've got kind of evidence of two things here. You've got evidence of the skepticism and this rationalism that's growing, and you've also got evidence then that there's a pushback against that skepticism by people who had very strong beliefs. If you heard a weird sound in the background, that was my phone. I'm really sorry. This is one of my favourite ones. So this is another sophist called Antiphon. And I just subscribe to what he says here. So Antiphon was asked what prophecy was, and he said, a guess by a sensible man. So again, it's this idea that not everybody was blindly supporting what prophecy said, that people like him were sort of going, yeah, but let's be honest, it's all a bit of a guess, isn't it? And you can make these intelligent guesses if you're thinking about things carefully, if you're a philosopher, which I can understand. We then have Xenophon, who, remember, is writing about Socrates, his mentor. So everything he talks about is trying to praise Socrates. So you have this guy here, Astrodemos, says, I certainly don't despise deity Socrates, I reckon it too high and mighty to need my attention. But in that case, if something high and mighty deigns to pay attention to you, you ought to pay it all more respect. So this idea that you should be worshipping the gods if the gods are kind, not kind to you, but respecting you. And I wouldn't neglect the gods if I thought they paid any heed to man. But there's also that questioning of like, well, if I thought the gods were really listening, then I would worship properly. But clearly some of the gods don't care, so why should I worship them? It's quite an interesting point. Now, slightly randomly, you have a source in Cicero. He wrote a lot about Greeks, because Romans, remember, are obsessed with the Greeks. So that's why I picked this. There's a couple of bits from Cicero, another one a little bit later. Picked out a couple of things from him, because he's writing about sophists and philosophy. So he talks about Diagoras, who is an atheist, called the Atheist. So again, we have this person who clearly says there is no religion. So that's quite a nice quote to have. And someone was talking to Diagoras and said, you think the gods are heedless of human affairs, so they don't care? How many people have, by their prayers, escaped the violence of the storm and reached the harbour safely? Good question. People pray to the gods for protection and they are safe. Surely this must mean there are gods. And Diagoras says, well, that's because there are no painted tablets of those who suffered shipwreck and perished in the seas. So he's just kind of making the point that it's kind of this confirmation bias. You may have heard that phrase before. It's used quite a lot about life. So because you want to believe in the gods, you see the evidence of the gods existing. So those who survived have said, oh, I gave a prayer to Poseidon or whatever, and therefore that's why I'm alive. And Diagoras is kind of going, yeah, but what about those who said that prayer and died anyway? You don't have evidence of those, do you? Because, they're dead, which is a fair point. So again, it's just this kind of rationalism, a bit of skepticism, saying just because people are praying and surviving doesn't actually mean anything's happening. We then have Plutarch writing about Nicias. Now, Nicias is a highly, highly religious guy. You may or may not remember from when we did the Sicilian expedition, and Nicias delayed their exit from Sicily because he saw an eclipse, and he saw this as a sign from the gods that he can't leave Sicily at that particular point. It was a bad omen. So this is talking about those use of omens, particularly around eclipses. So the majority thought that the eclipse of the sun around the 13th of the month was due to the moon. So this shows there is scientific understanding that eclipses are caused by the moon going in front of the sun in terms of our path. So that is, again, kind of rationalism. It's a rational understanding of the world. They thought it was strange that a sign from God was being revealed heralding some great disasters. So they're sort of saying, is it really sort of an omen? It's just science. It's literally just science. Anaxagoras, who was another sophist, talks about sort of this bit saying he writes about eclipses, essentially. And unfortunately, his work on eclipses wasn't really given any good reputation. So this is kind of the counter to what I've just said, that some were saying, oh, it's clearly science. Because it says people were intolerant of natural scientists and so-called stargazers because they reduced providence to irrational causes and random powers. So because you've got people like Anaxagoras, who is sort of saying, look, this is science, it's just astronomy, I can't say the word, you know what I'm trying to say, stars. It's not the gods, it's just life. And there are people who don't like this because people want to believe that there's a reason why things happen. People want to believe that fate is a thing and that you have your life set out in a path by some higher power. Still true to this day. And they don't like the idea that it's just by chance and like life happens and it's nothing more than that. There is no grand plan for you. You're just kind of bobbling along hoping for the best. And it says here Anaxagoras was imprisoned. So people were that angry about what he was saying that actually you have a sophist being jailed for questioning religion. And Socrates was later executed because of this philosophy, the idea that there are no gods. And obviously, if you've done this video after the stuff about Socrates, you'll know that's not entirely true why he was executed. But that was the charges he was facing was around blasphemy and the denial of the gods.